The Sierra spirit is alive and in good hands. The valley floors may fill with condos and commerce. The lower pistes may always be covered with groomed, machine-made snow that is boringly predictable. But as Joe Marillac pitched to the International Olympic Committee before the 1960 Winter Olympic Games at Squaw Valley, man can build almost anything, but he can't build mountains. Ours will always be there, frosted by real snow. Well, so writes Stu Campbell in his epilogue to a new book that's just come out. Welcome to Truckee Talks. I'm Maya Schneider. Our show today is focusing on a new book that's just been published, Mountain Dreamer. And with me today on the show are the authors Robert Frolich, known to many locals as Fro. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
And publisher Ellie Huggins from ColdStream Press. Ellie, welcome.
Thank you.
It is my pleasure to have both of you here. I really need to share with you, I purchased this book and within 2 days had it devoured. And that was a busy 2 days for me. I had lots of other things going on. So it was a lot of fun. It's a wonderful, beautiful book. I'd like to ask you, first of all, where did this idea come from? And Ellie, I'll direct that at you. How did it come to fruition?
Oh, about 2 years ago, or 3, I said the next book that our publishing company was going to do, our little press, ColdStream Press, was to be History of Skiing in the Sierra Nevada. And it sat around. I didn't have an author, and I didn't want to do it, and I didn't know anybody who could. But suddenly I learned of that to write the skiing history, you had to talk to the people who made the history. And therefore, I went into high gear thinking, got to figure out how to do this. And I read Fro's very moving piece in Sierra Heritage, commenting on In Memoriam of Wayne Polson. Aha, said I, maybe there's our author. And so with Laurel Lippert's help and others, I asked Steve Humphreys if he knew Fro and could somebody get us together. I did not know him personally, and we met, and that's how it got off to running.
And formed a pretty perfect union from what I can see from the book.
Well,
it worked.
it worked.
Fro, you've got a pretty unique background. Tell us a little bit about how you got into writing, because writing was not where you started.
No, I was always interested in journalism, but I never took a journalistic course in my life. I was a film major in college and took a lot of English courses, a lot of creative writing. Just through the years, I worked with ABC Sports for several years as an assistant to the producer, and after leaving them, I just started writing some articles for the local papers. Actually, it started out with the local rugby team, which I played on. And sports editor liked it so much, he said, hey, why don't you start doing some other things? So that's actually eventually how I got into the ski writing, and that was back in the 70s. So.
Now, locals up here will recognize an article that you're doing, or excuse me, a regular feature from the Bull Wheel. Is that the title?
Yeah, well, for the past couple of years, well, I wrote news from the Bull Wheel originally in the Sierra Ski Times, which was a weekly periodical that the Swift publications have today around the lake, and from there it was transferred to another one of their small magazines, weekly magazines, and this year it will carry on with the North Tahoe Truckee Weekly.
The photographs in this book are wonderful, and I'd be remiss if we didn't recognize the photographers that also contributed to your book. Tell me a little bit about
Well, that
them.
was part of the team I talked about in the introduction, putting together. I've known Carolyn Caddis, who did the principal portrait photographers, because she did portraits of success, impressions of Silicon Valley pioneers.
Yeah.
And I figured that if she could charm the likes of Hewlett-Packard, Hewlett and Packard, and Steve Jobs, and get them, these wonderful photographs of them, which she did, maybe she'd like to do the project. So I contacted her, and she said, "Yeah, I'm free. I'd be happy to do it." And then I knew that we had to have aerial views that had never been seen of these mountains. I couldn't go get stock photos from Squaw Valley. Everybody would have seen them one time or another. So I contacted Tom and also Laurel, who was going to be our editor, and said, "Tom, Laurel can fly you around and let's get these." And we made the contracts. And in a few cases, there are 2 photos that Tom had to take because I simply couldn't schedule Carolyn to do them at the right
So
time.
2 portrait photos.
2 portrait photos. She did Tamara McKinney. Mammoth Mountain.
And he's down in Bishop.
And he was in Bishop. Actually, he was off on his ranch, off of Bishop. You couldn't reach him by phone because he doesn't have one. It was quite a time, but it turned out he and Tom knew each other, and so they went down and did both the interview and the photography all in one fell swoop, and took the photo that was done of Mammoth at the same time.
And I'm sure that that was part of the hassle, if you will, of putting this book together, was you were organizing so many different people.
There were definitely some logistic problems at times, but everything seemed to work out one way or the other in the end. Going down to Mammoth or, say, Yosemite, and being able to get these people on rather short notice, it shows, excuse me, it shows how cooperative they were too.
Oh,
and
yeah.
how willing they were to work with us on the project.
And that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's a great thing. I need to ask you how you chose, who you chose, because there are so many wonderful stories in here, and yet there must be so many more stories that didn't get told.
Well, that's true, and actually, at times, one of the challenges of the book was so many of these subjects you could write a book on themselves. And when I first was talking with Ellie, I had in my mind, just through the years of already having met these people, or most of them, or heard of them, or done some articles in the past for other magazines, I had sort of a basic outline of who I thought should be in there, the people that made a specific historic difference. There's so many people that played minor yet very important roles, but there were others that I felt that really stood out. And then with Ellie's help and also with Laurel's, we fine-tuned that, so and added some and discarded some. But I guess you could say we played a little bit of the creator there, in that you did pick and choose, but then again, it was Ellie's book, so.
Well, we picked and chose according to the flow of history, too.
Okay.
And to the ski areas that we knew had to be included. And the addition of the racers and the instructors came sort of after we had gotten into the book and decided that there were human interest stories here that were so important to the whole story of sport of downhill skiing that, we better include them, and that was...
We were very fortunate, too, in that the majority of these people led such healthy, dynamic, outdoorsy lives that they're still very, even in their 70s and 80s, and even one gentleman who's in his 90s, are very still very active and
yes.
Still a lot of fun to talk to, and still
Yeah.
doing things and can recall things pretty well.
I think that's one thing that I found as a common thread through most of the people who had at some point had a good hand in the development of a ski hill, was that these were outdoors people. They were not quote unquote management types. They were go out on the hill and get something done.
Certainly in the first to begin with, where they went out for days on end to study water runoff for the city of Reno and also for the city of Los Angeles. Others, geez, you have a person like Peter Clausen, who was a tremendous athlete, but just I think last year at age 73, he's probably going to be mad at me now for his age, but age 73, did the great race, the 18-mile race, and I think in 2 hours and 30 minutes or something unbelievable. So, so these people, once again, are still very can still crank some pretty good turns.
I think another thing that I found so wonderful about the book is that a lot of the names were familiar to me, but I didn't know any of the stories. Mm-hmm. And the stories are really what bring these people to life to me and make me feel like I know a little bit about them.
Right.
We were talking before we actually started on the show that you had mentioned your editor had said, make the reader feel like they had just sat down and had coffee with them.
Yeah, that in some ways it was a challenge, in that there's so much material and so many anecdotes. You try to obviously to pick the fun ones, but also the ones that have kind of a message in them too. There's so many different. Hypnotized by these yarns that he's spinning, and a lot of them deal with getting caught in avalanches or going out into some of the toughest weather imaginable to knock ice off of shiv trains on towers and things of that nature. A lot of these people, once again, they just keep coming at you with these amazing tales, and
you can't,
no,
and you can't put them all in.
You can't.
Yeah, that's where I got a little bit of trouble with my editor, Laurel. What do you mean we can't use this? So.
Yeah, and what got left on the cutting room floor, as it were, must
Yes.
be also really interesting material.
And then when we got to the final part, the stuff that was hard for Fro, because he didn't understand at that point that we had to pull quotes to put under the pictures. And when you do that, you destroy the party line, or you destroy the storyline.
The punch, you give
the
away
punch,
the
and you
punch.
may have to rearrange the text in order to put that, because as a publisher, I realize that the way people are going to pick up this book in a bookstore is they're going to flip through and look at the photographs and probably read those quotes under the photographs, or they're going to read the little quote under the person's name, and that will get them interested. So we had to pick things that really were important, and sometimes that changed the story.
Changes the story, yes.
Well, it streamlines some of the stories, but looking, and you get so close to your material too, so that you don't have quite that, your objectivity kind of disappears at times. But now looking back at the book, there is a flow to it, and I wish we could have kept a little bit more in there at times, but that's just the writer in me.
Well, maybe that'll be volume 2.
Who knows?
When we come back from our break, which we'll take in just a couple of minutes, I'm going to ask you for some anecdotes, because I think that there must have been some wonderful stories to be told just from your experiences going out and interviewing. But I wanted to share a story with you that I had as a personal experience with this book. A dear friend of mine and a customer who is nearing 81 years old and still skis every day of the snow. I purchased this book for him as well as for me, and when he brought it home, he unwrapped it in his car, started to read it, and did not leave his car until he had read it from cover to cover, and came in the very next day to tell me his experiences with the book and the names that were familiar to him and how much he liked it. And I really wanted to share that with you. I usually try not to get too glowy and mushy about things, but this is just a wonderful gift that you've given to us.
That's a compliment. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's a compliment.
We'll be
Wonderful.
back in just a minute with Robert Frolich and Ellie Huggins and their new book, Mountain Dreamers, Visionaries of Sierra Nevada Skiing. We'll be back in just a minute. Hi, and welcome back to the show. We're here with Robert Frolich and Ellie Huggins and their new book, Mountain Dreamers, Visionaries of Sierra Nevada Skiing. Hey, I said it right that time. It's very exciting. I wanted to talk a little bit about the design of the book. We've been talking about some of the content and the photographs, but the design itself is really lovely, and we mentioned on break that there was Andrea, now you're going to have to help me out here,
Andrea
Ellie.
Hendrick.
And
Yes.
she did the design work as well as the cover?
She's been a friend. I've worked with her for years back when I was in the Bay Area. She's won 2 very prestigious awards for designs of books. One she did about quotes from John Muir, and another called Amicus Journal, which she did for the National Resources Defense Council. They have a book of poetry they put out, and she won a very, very prestigious national award for that.
Oh, she's done
And
good work
I
with
knew
this.
I needed Andrea, so I signed her up early. And when we talked about the cover, I knew I couldn't take a photograph and put it on the cover, even though the book is all black and white, out of choice from our part because of the era it represents in skiing. And so I said to her, in, you know, deep snow in the old days with poles flying, and I said, Andrea, that's what you use. And the
And she
cover
did.
and the cover has that style. And then there's a same style, and even that beret, you know, the white beret at the top. So, you know, I knew we'd hit it
That
when
was
that happened.
the theme for
That's,
it,
well, that
as
was
it
the
were.
era of skiing,
Yes.
too. They
Yeah.
were pretty wonderful skiers.
It really does give you a sense of that, too. Going back through here, there's lots of photographs that, of course, weren't taken specifically for this book, older photographs. How did you go about finding all of that information, the older information?
Well, we had a lot of help, obviously, from the subjects themselves. Some of their old photos of themselves back in those years. Through the years, too, with my ski riding, I've been able to sort of amass a personal file of photos of which we could select some. And just it was the whole book itself was a team effort from everyone. You know, I may have written the book, but Ellie was certainly the driving force, and with Tom and Carolyn, and also just the production team. It was really a nice effort from everyone. And once again, the subjects themselves were very cooperative, and they came up with some great photos. Unbridled joy, sort of out on the slopes. Things of that nature were great to come up with, and also I don't think it had been published before.
No, I don't think so either.
We were able even to use an Ansel Adams photo of Hannes Schroll. I talked with Bill Klein, who was very good friends with Hannes, and Bill said that for some reason Hannes always liked to have his photograph taken with moisture on his face or something like it. It was kind of an oddity, but then again, you know, Hannes, I guess, was definitely a...
He's a very physical person.
Yeah, actually, it was a great story about Hannes that Bill told me when Bill first introduced Hannes to the Donner Summit area, and specifically what's today's Sugar Bowl. Hannes was so elated; it had never been up there before, but just with the terrain, was immediately saying, "Oh, this is incredible." During the summer, we'll put a golf course over there, and of course, we'll have all the cows over here. and we Americans, we forget at times that from the old school in Austria, there were the cows during the summer were everywhere, you know, and you sort of they were part of the place or whatnot. Just the small anecdotes like that, I thought were rather funny.
And must have made the work more enjoyable for you.
Oh, sure.
Although I would imagine from a writer's standpoint, this was a pretty fun job.
Yeah, I felt very privileged to just not be able to interview these people, but become friends too. And it is a lot of fun. I've always enjoyed. That's part of the joy of doing journalism, is being able to educate yourself all the time, and also to meet such interesting and successful people. You have to realize that these folks, I believe, would have been successful at doing anything in any type of career. Yet they chose probably a fringe activity that they had no idea what direction the industry was going to go in, and something that was didn't have the security, obviously, of traditional careers. It makes you, I think that's part of the interest in the story. You know, you see somebody like Alex Cushing, who was a member of one of the top law firms in Manhattan, and chose instead to come out and be part, you know, create this ski resort with every catastrophe possible happening around him, from the weather or whatnot, and things of that nature. So that makes it interesting too. Try to get out of these men and women exactly why they'd be so crazy to do something like this.
And yet something that Ellie and I touched on at the beginning of the show, and I think that's one of the reasons why it will have local appeal. This book should have appeal nationally and certainly globally. But locally, there are so many of us that can really relate to coming to these mountains and falling in love. And not imagining your life being anywhere else but right here. And I could gather that from so many of the different stories that you wrote, that was the sense they
certainly.
shared.
And at the time, it was coming out of the Depression, and he couldn't really find a job for himself to do, so he created one, owner of a ski resort. And to get that road open, he used to go to Department of Transit, or the Nevada Highway Works, and literally sit there for hours on end until they would see him, and to get them to open that road up. He was very persistent. So, and Dave McCoy was the same thing. You know, Dave McCoy hawked his motorcycle for $85 to buy his first rope tow, and create a job for himself too.
Yeah, that's another fun part about this book is going back to the early stories where people were buying what we call now ski resorts for what the cost of a house would be to live up here near
Yes.
one of the ski resorts. Yet it was not as mainstream a sport certainly back then.
Well, people could argue even today that it's still a fringe business, even though I would say it's not. It's no longer a small industry. It's quite a major billion-dollar industry. It certainly has risen from the days when Dave McCoy ran his first lift off the rear axle of his pickup truck, and today Mammoth Mountain, of course, is one of the top 10, if not top 5, resorts in North America.
You did one of the fun interviews that you did was with Dick Reuter from Kirkwood, and he wrote in the very last paragraph, he told his kids, do what you want to do in life, don't get a job, do the kind of job you like. Unfortunately, my kids took me at my work. I got 3 of them working in the ski industry.
Right.
Yeah.
But and it wasn't the ski industry with a wink, it was the ski industry, and it was very serious.
Yeah, Bill's the first to admit that he's not what you'd consider a passionate skier. He says, though, that he's a passionate ski businessman. And from the beginning, he learned apprenticed somewhat under Dave McCoy, and tried to combine both the idea of living in the mountains and being in an industry that typically doesn't pay its people very well with the idea of it blossoming into such a huge industry today, 20 years later. And you know, Bill now is with Vail Associates, which is once again a very huge transnational corporation. Owns several resorts in Colorado, and he's heading up one right now for them. I think Keystone.
Let's talk a little bit in the remaining time that we have about some of the more local interest people that are in the book. A couple of the names that come to mind.
From the beginning, I wanted to include Norm. Most people wouldn't think maybe a resort such as Donner Ski Ranch belongs alongside the story of Squaw Valley or whatnot, but to me it's a gem. It's a mighty little mountain, as Dick Dorwith once called it to me. And Norm I think, embodies the maverick streak in a lot of these people that ran these resorts. And he's a character. He's a wonderful man. And he's one of these really tough guys that literally says he runs the place by the seat of his pants because he's in the loader plowing the parking lot at 5 in the morning or whatnot.
Ah, but then he knows who isn't arriving on time.
He knows when the breakfast cook comes, and so nobody can get past him there.
Because he's clearing the parking spaces.
But he has some great tales too, and I love the tale he tells of when he was one of the first of the ski bums, I guess. He was making so little money that every Sunday late afternoon he would go to the old Soda Springs Hotel, which was, a rather affluent spot at the time, and dig through the old sofas in the lounge and living room areas and for coins. And he would come out with about $10 and change every Sunday. He said, "Hey, whatever it took,
to live off of.
whatever it took to ski." Those are just some funny stories, and you get him going, and Norm will get you laughing for quite some time with different anecdotes.
Well, and you refer to him as somewhat of a maverick, and yet if you go back again to the early stories, most of those people were.
Yes.
Most of those people were really pioneers and carving their own trail, if you will.
One of my best friends, and I think I first wrote an article on Tamara when she was 15 years old or whatnot. She's a lovely woman. In fact, she just had her first child, and she's, I think, a person that, once again, embodies the passion for skiing. Skiing was always a great release with her, but she was so successful, and people forget literally how what a champion she was, and still is in my mind. But she won 18 World Cups, went through a series of unfortunate injuries to do this. Won her first points, I believe, when she was 16. Still has a great outlook on skiing and on life. Her brother the outdoors and the fun of skiing and other sports. He was a tremendous guy. It's nice to have him recognized.
And nice to see that family in the book. Again,
Oh,
it's the local girl makes good. She really had a
she had
hard
a
time of it, and
Well, but
but
she's,
she made it look easy.
you know, Peekaboo Street's come along now, which is great in American skiing, winning so many races. But Tamara, once again, is the only North American to ever win the overall World Cup title, and 1983. But since then, she was in 3 Olympics. I mean, she had staying power.
Local girl makes good.
And our people who were profiled all had staying power. I think they stuck with what they started. And they kept in the business through thick and through thin.
That's a theme you can
Bill
read.
Killebrew is picture when he said, "Well, I'll fly up to you in my red helicopter." And he came, and Carolyn was so excited. She said, "I can't wait to take this guy's picture." And she got some wonderful shots. And then he said, "Do you want to go for a ride, ladies?" And we said, no, I think he said girls, but anyway, whatever he said, we said, "Sure."
We're in.
And 45 minutes later, after a lecture on safety in helicopters and how they really do work, he took us and we landed on the top of Mount Anderson. It was an experience.
Lovely, lovely. So you got some experiences that you're going to have to write about after writing the book.
Right. Yeah, taking photos of great people.
Well, we just have a minute left, and I wanted to wrap up and ask you if you briefly had anything else you wanted to say about the book, or anybody else to thank. I'm sure there were leagues of people that helped in that.
Ellie?
Well, I have to thank my husband, Dan Wendon,
Dan.
who is now the sales manager. He's in charge of really moving the books out the door.
For me, the book has been a big break in my career. You know, for years I've been writing for different publications and magazines, but this is something that was a much bigger challenge and a bigger project. And Ellie really stayed with me through some thick and thin moments where I think I was brain dead for a couple of months there. I wasn't creating as much copy as maybe I should have been, but she stuck with me. Laura Lippert did a tremendous job with the editing, and really prodded me and coached me and taught me a lot of things. It was a big learning experience. And I hope to go on from here and do some other things.
Well, and that would have been my next question if we'd had any time, but we are going to be looking forward to seeing more from you in print. This is a wonderful gift.
I hope so, if I can keep my number 2 pencil sharpened.
Sharpened.
Oh, now you have a computer.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's another thing.
Upgraded, did you?
Yes, yes.
Robert, Ellie, thank you very much
thank
for
you.
being on the show, and thank
Thanks,
you for
this is-
sharing this book with us. It's just a wonderful, wonderful
welcome.
book. Thank
Thanks.
you.
This was fun.
And thank you for joining us on Truckee Talks. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Times we laughed and talked, seems like yesterday.